Well, thank you all for coming to our monthly artist talk held every Saturday from 1 to 2. And we are happy to present half of the new artists on the tour of Clark County Open Studios. And if you haven't been on the tour, you missed out. But you come next year, and we're very happy to have a piece from every artist represented here in the gallery. If you haven't been to the gallery before, we've been here since 2017. It was opened by Ann John and still runs the business, owns the business. And then there's 5 additional gallerists, including myself, that help get things going. So we'll just go through, starting from left to right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Robertson, and apparently I'm on the left. So this is my painting here. It's called Dreaming New Dreams. So I work with encaustic painting, which is painting with hot wax. I tell my students that it's the oldest form of painting you've never heard of. And it's a mixture of beeswax, resin, and pigment that we use to make the paintings. I start with watercolor first as my background. So things like these plants, I use live plants and end up with those painting in and around them with watercolor. And then I move to the encaustic and I layer layers of hot wax onto the painting. And I brought props so I could pass this around so you can, if you haven't felt it, you can feel it. I imagine that they don't want me having you rub your hands all over that particular painting. But what you'll see here is, and you feel the surface is very satisfying. You'll see that there are places that you can layer wax, reveal wax, and even reveal that watercolor that's underneath it. And then you can start carving into it if you want to. So I'll hand that around. And so the theme of this painting is from a collection called Choose to Rise. And it's not my most current collection, but it seemed like a really good opportunity to sort of bookend my move and new things that are happening in my life. And I am dreaming new dreams. So this is a perfect painting for this. In that collection, I go through lots of imagery where, you know, we always have something in our lives that maybe isn't as good as we want it to be. But I feel like it's our reaction to that is how we can sort of bring ourselves together in that Choose to Rise theme. And so I brought a catalog. See, I came with props. Brought a catalog of these, the Choose to Rise imagery, and I'll hand it around here so you can just flip through that if you want to take a look. You're welcome. And so this just seemed like the perfect opportunity to have something from that collection in this wonderful show. Good?
Yeah, and we have a few minutes if anyone has questions for Linda.
Okay, great. Anyone tried encaustic painting? I know you have, yeah? Nobody else? Well, oh, there's Peggy. Hi. You always come in with a flourish. Good job. Question? There's no technical reason to start with watercolor under encaustic. The only thing it's not compatible with really is acrylic. And so I like to use the watercolor as a base layer because it allows me to, when I add the wax, I can add either wax that is clear or colored. And in this case, I'm making a window to the background. So this part here, the woman's body, has only clear wax on it, where the rest of it has the colored wax. And I've actually finished this edge with oil as well. So it's compatible with so many different media, and I like to use it in a very mixed media way. You could also just use wax through the whole thing and have nothing else in there. I even collage photographs in with my wax sometimes, so very. And that's coming from someone who's tried it. Yes, it is. Yes, you can either make it very smooth or very textured, anywhere in between. When I make the wax very smooth, I use a blowtorch. So like a propane torch, or you can use a little creme brulee torch from the kitchen, but I like the big torches. And it's a matter of smoothing it out in places so that you can get the whole thing as smooth as possible in sections first, and then you smooth the whole thing. So if I were working on a small piece, I would be able to do the whole thing at once. But in this case, once I get to one end of it, the other side is cool already. So I have to work in sections and then bring that together with the smoothing it out. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I started out as a photographer. Oh, sorry. I started out as a photographer, and I got tired of matting and framing my work. I kept, it's just not an interesting part of that for me. And so I was looking for a new way to finish my photographs. And you can put wax on top of these photographs. And then I realized you can carve into it. You can color it with other media like oil. And there's just so much you can do with encaustic painting. So I went completely off track from photography, and now somehow I'm a painter, which is very exciting. But I've been doing this for 20 years. So it was a long, one of those long, slow processes that we artists have as we keep exploring. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Thank you for having me. So I was raised in Victoria, BC, but I was born in the United States. I met my husband's also here. I met him in the San Diego area, Encinitas, and we would drive up to see my family and just fell in love with this Vancouver area. And we've been here 32 years now because we decided to move here. But I realized as I got older that Canada had very thorough arts and ceramic program for kids growing up. So when I got a little older, and Paul, we produce a podcast for potters because Paul got highly interested in pottery, and I would type the show notes and I would listen to the potters, and I was just making pinch pots at the time with his leftover clay. And I thought, potters are beautiful people. Like, I just fell in love with them. And I got more and more interested, and I would try the wheel, and it just wasn't my thing. It was messy, and I liked it. I admired what people were doing, but it wasn't for me. And then I took a slab building class, and it was like something clicked for me. And it was just magical. It was magic to build things with. This is my work here. You can see seams and lines on my work because I built them mostly with slabs. And I was able to intern with a lady who, her name is Sage Cortez. I would drive to St. Helens and spend time with her, and I learned so much. And she just blew my mind because her work was so beautiful, and she let me ask all the questions. And I also do watercolor. And so what I've expanded into is experimenting with how can I put my watercolor on ceramics. And this was the first piece that I thought turned out kind of like, yeah, I'm figuring it out. So I thought I would share that if you guys want a closer look. I love trees. Yeah, so I don't know what else I want to share. Sorry, I got sidetracked with the... It's not real. I'm not applying it with watercolor. I learned that I have to use underglazes quite thick. Watercolor, as you see there, is very translucent. And on paper, that's lovely to do, but you can't, when I first did that on the ceramics, it would just disappear. So I have to be counterintuitive and put really thick underglazes, but sort of water, like layers. I figured out that layers of thinness comes out more like watercolor. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I grew and learned by taking lots of workshops. I'm a workshopaholic. We produce online classes through COVID, through the podcast. And so I would just keep taking these classes because we were producing them. And which are still available. And so just every little class you take, you kind of integrate a little more into your work. So I have many people in my head when I make a handle, I think, oh, so-and-so taught me how to do that. It's like a lovely compilation of so many people. And I wanted to say also, it's never too late to start something new. I'm 58. I started pottery in my late 40s. So it's never too late to get passion and start something new. So.
Jennifer, what's the name of your podcast and how do people find your classes?
So our podcast is called The Potter's Cast, and Paul is the person you hear speaking on it, and I'm behind the scenes. And our pottery classes, mostly you can find it on Instagram, but also on our website called The Potter's Class. So it's The Potter's Cast and The Potter's Class. Even I get mixed up. It's sort of it's all there on our website. If you want to try it out, I'd love to, if you want to contact me after you've taken a class, I'd love to talk to you about it. Or we talk to each other as a group when we're doing the class. We do it all on Zoom. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's cone 6. Yeah, yeah. The clay body is actually Georgie's clay. That's a wonderful thing about Vancouver is right there is Georgie's. It's so close. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't be happier with that. So, yeah, any other questions? Well, thank you. Yeah, like at first I would blend it because I thought it wouldn't, like it was an error or it needs to be smooth. But then I just started saying, no, I just want to be true to the slab. And what my mentor taught me is just, there's a time where you just stop. It's hand built. It's going to be like, I want it to be a little bit wonky, a little bit like a hand built this. It's not a Target item. It's hand built. So I want to celebrate that more. It's unusual. I didn't realize how unusual it was until it's kind of hard to find, that where people leave the seam. So, yeah. It's not only the fact that you made it by hand. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, a lot of people when I make my mugs, my seam is right up front where you can see it right by the handle. A lot of people put it behind. But I started putting it up front. I wanted to be like, no, this was a lot of work to make this. You need to see the line. So,
thank you, Jacque.
Yeah, okay, you're welcome.
When life gives you lemons, make art. So I've been a lifelong lover of the beach, and I have probably 60,000 beach pictures. So the last time I went, friends of ours stayed in a beach house, and it was the first time we'd ever stayed on the beach that you could see the oil drills. And it was so disruptive to me. And because I'm like a micro beach photographer, I take pictures of little plants and the mollusk holes. And at sunrise, the light's just gorgeous. And so this piece originated with a very vibrant red decaying leaf, which is what you see here. And I loved it. It was against this very stark background, or, the white sand background. So this piece, I didn't even realize my subconscious was cooking on it until I made this piece and I turned it the other way. And then this part of it is a antique ceiling fixture in the Fox Theater in St. Louis. They have these very ornate curly Q fixtures and wall work. And so I had taken this picture of it, and when I was layering these pictures, because this is a series of 3 photographs that I layer and work with the images until I get something I like. So originally, I thought this was going to be a tide pool. And I had it with this down in the bottom, which my sister still disagrees and says it should be the other way. So I combined those, and this was, the third picture was just the sun reflecting off the water. So that this is the ripples of that. So when I layer them, I will switch the order of what photograph is on top, because I can reorder it. And so when I got the composition to where I felt I liked it, then I send it to a company and they print it for me, and then I bring it home and stitch it. In this piece, I wanted to really define the leaf, and I wanted to add some texture, as you see on the beach, where the sand if there's something laying, the sand is all on it. So there's texture on the edges of it. So I wanted to reflect that, not in sand, but in texture that was captured in the photograph. So yes, lots of stitching on this. Some of my work is not made this way. Some of it is made with hand-dyed cloth or commercial cloths. But I have been working a lot in this way because I work from my subconscious. So things are brewing in me. This week, things are really brewing in me. So I really see my work is going to be shifting even more inward and doing a visual expression of what I'm feeling inward and reflecting that out in the hopes that people who view the work can also get in touch with their own humanity, their own feelings, like to create an opening where you can explore your own thoughts and feelings about things. My process is I draw every morning, I journal every morning, I listen to music and dance every morning, because I really think it gets me in a creative place that I'm really working out of what's within me instead of the external. So when I say life gives you lemons, you make art. And like today, my car wouldn't start. My perfectly reliable car would not start. And you know, everything lined up perfectly. My husband was watching football not too far away, and he was able to come get me, and I dropped him back off. You know, so it all worked out. I was here, but that energy of that being late, feeling stressed, you know, not wanting to let people down, you know, all of that is just going on in your mind. And so I know it'll show up tomorrow in my doodle. And stuff that's, you know, very personal to me. And some of it I don't even recognize till I create it. Like this, I was just like, oh man, that is that oil drill on a beautiful beach that so disturbed me. And the color palette just reflects that. You know, it's like a sense of angst about that these beautiful beaches, and you look out and there's 6 oil drills, and at night they look like monsters. You know, they look like robots, and like they're just gonna crawl right onto the shore. So that is my process with this piece.
Are there any questions?
So when you send out your photographs, does the person that you have processed send it back on fabric? How do you get the
Yes.
Well, they put the photographs.
I submit the image, and then they do the printing. And the printing is a piece of cloth.
Okay.
In
And
this,
then you stitch it.
and then I layer it just like a traditional quilt, and then I stitch it. And depending on what the middle layer is, it will create either more loft on the surface, or if I use a thin one, then it becomes more like a flat painting. And this is printed on silk, so this is what gives it that lovely shimmer. And I'm so excited. I have an order coming in, so I'll have a whole new palette, like 100 yards of designed fabric. So it's very exciting.
And I know they were.
Yeah. Yeah, it disturbed me so much. If I would have known they were that so close to the beach house that our group rented, I would have said absolutely not. Because the beach is a soothing place to me. It's where I go to restore and get grounded and reconnect. And I was just, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it. I would sit on the beach and I would just have to turn and look down the beach. I couldn't look out over the water. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you could see it. Little black pearls.
Well, you live in a magical fairy place. I love you going to your studio. Like your whole property was so inspirational. And
Oh, thank you.
Jacque,
Thank
will
you.
you be available after the talk for a little while?
I will be available. And one of the things I wanted to let people know is my studio is open by appointment. So if you want to come in and look at anything in person, see new stuff that's in process, I would love to host you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My name is LB. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a wood sculptor. This is me right here. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. My work is all based on anatomy. Everything you can think of, botanical, insects, the animal kingdom, long extinct species, ocean life, fungi. And most recently, in the last couple of years, I've been working on this body of work, which is based on soft tissues and human anatomy. It started back in 2020, and it really started as like this exploration of how stress and PTSD manifest physically in the body. And so I was doing a lot of pieces kind of around breath. I was making pieces about lungs and diaphragms. And then COVID hit. It was really interesting. I was like midway through all these things. And so the body work kind of took on some of that narrative as well, where, you know, this idea of being like fearful of our own bodies and other people's bodies in this new way. So this piece in particular is actually, you know, all the work is sort of intuitive and kind of about my own internal process. And so everything's like kind of relevant to my life and what's happening. And so this piece is actually a piece that's based on anatomy in like this part of your body. I have a lot of anatomy books. I'm pretty obsessed. And I don't know if you guys are familiar, if you look at like really, really old anatomical drawings, they, you know, some of those drawings they kind of deconstruct things in this way that's not very anatomically correct, but very interesting. Like back in the Renaissance times and everything. And so like this is kind of playing off that, like if you were to like take your forearm muscles and deconstruct it. I saw a couple different anatomy drawings where they did this kind of thing and they splayed the muscles out. And so these would be like fingers up here, and these would be like tendons, and then these are sort of muscles. But my work, you know, they tend to be amalgams. So like I'm drawing from all these different visual things that I explore. And so there's often a lot of different sources of inspiration that become part of it. And so this is more like kelp inspired as well. And I do a lot of wood bending in my process. And so the one side of each one of these sort of leaves or whatever you want to call them is like a bent piece. So what I did was I cut this shape and this curve, and I kept the other part of the board. And then I took all these thin strips of veneer, and I use veneer because it's like flexible. And I put glue on this side, on this piece, and then I use the other piece as sort of a clamping mechanism. And so then I clamped and glued all these together in these weird shapes. And then these went way up there, and then I, over time, integrated them into that top part. But those would essentially be like bones and tendons in your hand here, and then into your forearm. And I mean, I've been working in wood for 20 years and have had to learn how to work like really smart over the years, because it does create like such, it's really taxing on your body. And so, you know, I'm really interested in a lot of different things with anatomy, and that's kind of where that came from. The body of work is still continuing. I've got a number of pieces in process. And again, over the years, it's evolved. I have long COVID and chronic fatigue, which has really affected my studio practice. And so the work has taken on some narrative about that. I'm also a transgender human. And that was part of the initial body work, was kind of talking about sort of what it's like to live in this world in this time under the stresses of always worrying about, you know, healthcare and different things as a trans human. So I've got a couple pieces that are sort of talking about like hormones and the way the body uses, like, sends messages to itself in different ways. So yeah, it's all over the place.
Are there any questions?
Thank you. It's a bonus. Sorry. It's a bonus. Yeah, it's really hard to plan for that. So yeah, the two things I tell people that I can't plan for, I can't plan for the shadows really. And then I also can't plan for how the wood grain shows up, because I'm starting with a larger block of wood and I'm carving into it, and there's no way to know what you're going to encounter. So all of that is just luck. Yeah. So when you say, are you kind of talking about the surface texture, or are you actually talking about the flow? Yeah, I mean, that's just, I'm using power tools to carve, and that's just kind of intuitive. I really, from a technical standpoint, I'm really trying to push the medium of wood to do things that you don't expect to see. And so I think a lot of that is just like practice over time. And then it's also a lot of just like stepping back in space and seeing how it reads from a distance. And also, I didn't get all of these on the first go. Like some of these got carved a second time because I didn't like the way it turned out the first time. So yeah. There's a couple local lumber yards that I use. I start with all kiln dried lumber. So it's just coming in boards, and then I'm doing all my own milling and gluing it up into different shapes and then carving back. Thank you. Yeah, this is a custom cleat that is U-shaped for in there. But I've been an art handler as well. I've worked in galleries, museums, and I've been an art handler for about 20 years. So when you handle a lot of art, you learn you want to make it as user-friendly as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
I'm Paul Blais. This is my work here. And I believe in magic. I understand that, like magic, there's the sleight of hand, there's the mirrors, things can be up a sleeve. And when people are creating their magic, we will all see what they do. We'll see all the actions, and there'll be something very insignificant that will be observed, but we won't see the significance of it until it's all said and done, and then we're kind of in awe over it. And it's amazing when it happens. And that insignificant thing that people just brush off at the beginning or in the middle of it as being not that important is kind of the thing that my wife and I, we've embraced, we work with something that most people find insignificant, which is, basically mud, Don't get it on the shoes. You don't want it on your clothing. Definitely not in the house. Don't get it on the car, because that's the stuff of insignificance, and we don't want it there. And if it gets on there, it's going to be time to clean it up and get rid of it. But we've embraced it. And with manipulation, with a little bit of fire, a little bit of extra hard work, then something happens that was not all that great, becomes something kind of special, can be a little bit of. We've been through a lot as a couple. I was given 18 months to live about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and I think I'm going to make it. But we went through a really difficult time. And she mentioned that, like we have a podcast, and when we came out of that, I was going in to see a doctor for an exam, and we were expecting to have another bout of cancer, because it was just every time we went in there was cancer. And I went in and asked the doctor, I said, what do you think my hope is, or my odds are? And he just flat out said to me, he said, I don't have a lot of hope for you. And within 10 minutes, there was hope. We came out of there, and something that everyone else would have wanted to avoid, which, believe me, I wanted to avoid it. We had to embrace it. And we took something that was so hard and we turned it into something kind of crazy cool. We came out of that meeting, that appointment, and we decided to do a podcast that was about ceramics. And it's kind of crazy. It's about clay, something that we find to be, most people, again, it's not that big of a deal. The thing I respect about this gallery, and the thing I respect about, I've been to shows here at this gallery where I've come in and I've seen artists that have been here, and I've had them on my show as a result, is that a lot of the world looks at ceramics as not that significant. And what I love about this gallery and Open Studios is that they give it respect. They give our material respect. I lost my eye summer of last, and it's been a really difficult process. Now, I still have it for now. It's coming out in a couple of months. And we've been through the ringer, my wife and I, and the things that we would have wanted to avoid, we've had to embrace. But it's an amazing journey we've been on, and how it's got to this place. I mean, I've read studies about people who've been through trauma and through hard times, and how they've come out of them, and they go through these incredible growth spurts afterwards. And psychologists will call that post-traumatic growth syndrome. And I don't know. I just think it's just magic. I've come to believe it. I take mud and I throw this stuff into these. I work on the wheel. It's glued down. We throw it. It's magical. And so I take this clay. This is the actual color of the clay. Is this gray color? Jennifer's, that's the actual color of her clay body. We celebrate our clay, our mud, and we let it shine through instead of covering it with glaze or covering it with other things, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the way that we do it. But we embrace the fact that we can take something that most people reject, and we can put it into a shape, into a form, and turn it into a solid rock in the shape that we thought was the best shape for it. It's magic. Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. Yes. No, it's just it just worked out that I should have. We probably shouldn't. I probably shouldn't have made it this far. But it was bladder cancer, and it kept coming back again and again, and we just got. It was a lot of love, a lot of prayers, and here we are. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Hi. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you to the Art in the Cave for hosting us, and thank you to all the other speakers for your beautiful words. I'm a photographer, this is my work, and I want to talk to you about how we can represent time in a photo. So most people think photography is very static. You take a photo, people are always talking about the instant, the decisive moment, but that's not how I want it to work. In this photograph, time is, we're not looking at a decisive moment. We're looking at a few minutes of exposure, which gives the water this ethereal feel. And that's all well and good, but I think there's a little more going on. When the title is, the work is titled The Long Defeat. And what that means to me is talking about the slow erosion of the world and the slow fall of beauty. When you look at these cliffs up here, they seem so heavy and harsh, and yet over millennia they've fallen into the tide. And maybe in the next 100 years the trees will too, and maybe it'll take 1,000, it doesn't matter to the ocean, it's going to happen. And yet, despite all of this rugged harshness, there's this dainty little waterfall juxtaposed against it. And when this photograph, it might not be in an instant, but it's a reminder to me that the past has happened and the future will come, and there's nothing we can do about that. And by being in a single moment, because even if it's not a single moment, by being at a certain time, the way we see the light is the way it is, the way the water is the way it is, it won't be that way again. And that's a reminder that there was what came before and what came after. Thank you for your time. Does anybody have any questions? On the Oregon coast. Yeah. No. It's Oswald West State Park. Yeah, it's about a minute or two. Yeah. Thank you. Is that what you focus on, is long exposure? No, this is just this one work. Most of my photography is monochrome. I think that by working in black and white, it sort of separates it from reality a little bit more. And I have a little bit more flexibility to talk about what I want rather than what's there necessarily. Yeah.
What drew your, I'm sorry. What drew your interest in photography?
A lot of things. Yeah. It's funny because when you start photography, I think most people are interested in what's beautiful, but then the more you do it, you sort of, at least I am more interested in what is nature telling us, and how do I express how I'm feeling on a given day, and sort of that dialogue between the two. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 The craft is a big part of the work for me, and so a lot of the time you go back 10 times to get a shot. And the printing, first 5 don't work to your standard, so gotta go try again, so. Nikon, but I use different cameras depending. It's whatever I can use, it doesn't matter. Thank you very much for your time.